Hello, and welcome to Catholicism in the Car. My name is Parker Zerbal.
Alright. I want to talk about the topic of redemptive suffering and why even a secularist can gain value from it, or even hop on board, in a sense, with the concept of redemptive suffering. So, redemptive suffering, again, is basically meaning that suffering has meaning, that because good can come out of it. So suffering has meaning because good can come out of it. And from a Christian perspective, redemptive suffering is rooted in Christ's sacrifice on the cross. Now, if you're a non-Christian, or if you're an agnostic, an atheist, just materialist, secularist, what does redemptive suffering mean for you? And why would it be something that you could believe in and start to incorporate into your psyche and into your daily life? Well, I think, first of all, that in many ways, it is clear that many sufferings bring good from them. So think, for example, I would say this is a pretty obvious example. If I die for you, I'm enduring suffering that a good may come of it. That's a type of redemptive suffering. If I die for you, if I sacrifice my life for you, let's say I'm a soldier and you're in my unit, I take a bullet for you. Or if I'm a police officer, or whatever you think. If I'm a father of a family, I sacrifice my life for my children. That's a very real and concrete form of redemptive suffering. Now, it's redemptive suffering, on a purely natural level, right? But that's what I'm trying to argue here. What are some other ways of redemptive suffering? Well, think about pain in general. Pain in general is a type of redemptive suffering in the sense that it brings good. Children will often ask, why do I have to experience pain? Wouldn't it be great if I just couldn't experience pain? No, that would be horrible. Because you would very quickly hurt yourself in major ways. If you lacerate your foot very deeply on a piece of glass as you are, running through the grass, let's say. So as you're running through the grass as a child, maybe somebody broke a bottle and there's a big shard of glass in that grass. So glass in the grass. All right. This was not a very good example for a podcast where we're using audio. But I think you know what I'm saying. You get a laceration from it, deep cut. If you had no idea, you could quickly lose a lot of blood. That could be really bad for you. If you had no clue and you kept walking for a long time, you might faint eventually. And if nobody's around to help you, you could die. Assumedly, you would clot before then. But if you got a really major gash on your foot, you might not be able to. Okay, so if you cut your foot on some grass and you don't have pain, you could die from that, or virtually any other thing you're thinking of, any other sort of injury, you could die from it if you didn't have the ability to feel pain. So pain is redemptive in that sense that pain is a good thing. That suffering that we feel from the pain, good comes out of it, in that we have the opportunity to get help. And I think there are other, pretty obvious examples that could be given on how redemptive suffering could be understood from a purely natural perspective. Now, the really important thing here, I think, isn't just understanding that good can come out of suffering, but it's how we then apply that to our life and how we then are consistent with that aspect of reality. Because I'm arguing here that redemptive suffering is just an aspect of reality. That good comes out of suffering is just an aspect of reality. Now, you might retort and say, what good comes out of the Holocaust? Or what good comes out of school shootings? That's a great question. I don't know if I have an immediate response to that. But I would say that this argument is not dependent upon every aspect of suffering to be redemptive. I think that, as far as I can tell, I'll have to do some more thinking on this, but I think that idea is only something that you can get via a Christian view of divine redemptive suffering, okay? How God can bring good out of literally the worst evil, including the Holocaust and including school shooting. And, first and foremost, that good would be the hopeful salvation of those innocent persons who were slaughtered. From a natural point of view, it's harder to say how those things could be redemptive. Okay, so from a secularist perspective, what is the point? Or in what way can incorporating the idea of redemptive suffering lead to certain other ideas for someone who's more of a secularist? Well, if you keep in mind that good can be brought out of your suffering with the examples that I gave earlier, that means that you don't have to live in such a way where you're always attempting to flee suffering. So, as I mentioned, I think last episode, 2 episodes ago maybe, it seems that a large reason why many people are in support of abortion is because they're trying to flee the suffering of, an unplanned pregnancy or the suffering of pregnancy in general. A lot of it maybe comes down to trying to flee from the suffering that comes along with the idea that the world is overpopulated, which, side note, is a huge myth. Anyway, that's a topic for another day. So one would need, I think, to examine many of their questions regarding morality in particular. What is one of the main reasons why people use contraception? Well, it's to flee suffering. Why is it that many people seek rampant sexual lives? Well, to flee suffering. If one can start to see, even from a natural level, that good can be brought out of one's sufferings, then one doesn't have to use pleasure as an antidote for suffering. One can see, at least intellectually, if one can see intellectually that good is being brought out of many of their sufferings, if one can search for even just the natural good that can come from one's suffering, then one doesn't need to live a type of hedonism where they are seeking pleasure to reduce the suffering in their life. One doesn't need to make pleasure then the ultimate end of their life. Because really, in I'd say at least its basic sense, pleasure is the absence of suffering. And in our reality, suffering is the default, not pleasure. So we end up wishing to get rid of the suffering or forget the suffering or cover over the suffering with various pleasures. That it can be sexual pleasures, it can be pleasures of intemperance, so gluttony, the pleasure that comes from not working out, I struggle with that one. And working out, fitness is an incredibly good example of natural suffering that is redemptive, that good comes out of it. You suffer through the athletics or the exercises that you perform to bring about a greater good. So even just from a natural level, I mean, this is this idea of natural redemptive suffering is the backbone of natural virtue. When you talk about the pagan philosophers, they promoted the natural virtues. Many of them, not all. The Epicureans definitely, sought pleasure as the greatest good, but they didn't mean pleasure necessarily in the like hedonistic sense, like sex, food, all that kind of stuff. For them, it could even be intellectual pleasure, which that's more in line with what I'm talking about. But the pagans like Aristotle, Plato, they had what we now call the four natural virtues: temperance, prudence, fortitude, and what's the last one? I'm blanking. What is the last one? Shoot, temperance. Oh, justice. So justice, temperance, prudence, and fortitude. Right? Those four natural virtues that lead to someone living a naturally virtuous life. And I would argue that Christian sexual ethics is natural ethics. I think we see that by not only that people, there are many negative effects to living a rampant sexual life. STDs are a very good and a very out in the open example of that. So anyway, I hope this helps a little bit in understanding how redemptive suffering can be seen from a natural level, and why understanding suffering as redemptive can be an aid to a person even in living a life of purely natural virtue, not to mention supernatural virtue. So there are my thoughts on that. Hope that helps. Thanks. Oh, real quick, please feel free to subscribe to any of my podcasts on any of the podcast players. Find me on YouTube. Please subscribe. Like me on Facebook, like the Catholicism Car channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all there. Catholicism Car. And then I also have a Patreon account if you wish to support what I do at this podcast and this YouTube channel. And you can also support us on Anchor.fm. There's a support button there you click on. I also have links to all this on my website's support page at www.catholicisminthecar.com.